In this video, I'll analyze the immense fugal finale of Bruckner's Fifth Symphony in B-flat major. This has long been one of my favorite symphonic movements, and many of my listeners have been requesting that I make this video ever since I started to have an audience. Over the past century, this movement has been aptly compared to the finale of Mozart's Jupiter Symphony, a similarly miraculous display of contrapuntal prowess that I've discussed in a prior video. Given all of this, please don't be intimidated by the video's very necessary length. I promise it will be worth your careful attention. The movement begins with an almost identical reprise of the slow introduction from the first movement, starting with this pizzicato bass line with successive string entries that create breathtaking harmonic suspensions. The only difference from the first movement is the addition of these falling octaves from the clarinets, anticipating the falling octave of the first main theme of this movement. After a pause, the solo clarinet now interrupts, revealing slightly more of the green theme that will enter later in its entirety. After another pause, Bruckner quotes the main theme of the first movement with its original tremolo accompaniment from the violins, but now with entries of the green falling octave from the trumpet, followed again by the clarinet's interruption with the beginning of the green theme. As I mentioned in a prior video about Bruckner's Seventh Symphony, a hallmark of his thematic material is its meandering tonality, often modulating to various other keys before the theme itself has run its course. This purple theme is a great example of this, as you will now hear. Bruckner now quotes the main theme from the slow second movement, played by the oboe with a pizzicato triplet accompaniment from the strings, but now adding the green falling octave, this time played by the flute. Notice that this slow introduction has been an obvious homage to the finale of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony that begins with similar vignettes from the prior movements, punctuated by recitativo passages from the lower strings, much like the anticipatory clarinet interruptions we just heard from Bruckner. I once had to correct someone who thought that Beethoven's Ninth Symphony was the first ever example of a symphonic finale that quotes prior movements. This person was ignoring the quite famous example from Beethoven's own Fifth Symphony, not to mention much earlier examples like Haydn's 46th Symphony in B major that features a surprising interruption of the presto finale with a reprise of the minuet. All four movements of Bruckner's Fifth Symphony are extraordinarily interconnected thematically. For example, listen to the opening of the Scherzo third movement that begins by quoting the bass line from the preceding slow second movement we just heard. I'll play them one after the other for comparison. The two inner movements also share motifs from the oboe melody itself, including this falling sevenths figure that is ubiquitous in both movements. Perhaps this redundancy is the reason Bruckner chose not to include a quotation from the third movement in the slow introduction of this finale. After the quotation of the second movement, the slow introduction ends and the exposition section begins with one more clarinet entry of the incomplete Green theme to introduce the first fugal passage of the movement. The subject of this opening fugue is the now for the first time complete version of the march-like Green theme. Notice that the score itself mentions that there will be three themes. This refers to the three themes that play the largest roles in the most contrapuntal passages throughout the movement, and that all return in the triumphant coda section. The first theme is the one that we are about to hear. The second theme is a chorale melody introduced for the first time later in the movement, and the third theme is the returning purple theme from the first movement that was already quoted in the slow introduction. The opening fugue involves only the Green theme, and although there are no recurring counter-subjects to highlight, the accompaniment is motivically related to the theme, so I'll give it this more subdued green color. Now listen to this entire opening fugal passage. The stage has now been set for the contrasting second theme of this large-scale sonata movement. Bruckner is famous for these lyrical dance-like second themes present in almost all of his symphonic movements, and he even had his own special name for them, Gesangsperiode, or song period. Although this is not one of the three important themes mentioned earlier, it nonetheless plays a significant role in the later complicated contrapuntal sections. The theme is actually a reworking of a theme from the previous scherzo movement, disguised now in duple meter, but beginning with the same 5 notes. Listen to both, one after the other, for comparison. Notice that the theme from the third movement is played over the same bass line discussed earlier, and that it begins with an upward leaping sixth, followed by an upward leaping seventh, followed by an upward leaping octave. Similarly, the theme as it now appears in the finale, played over a pizzicato accompaniment, begins with imitative entries of the upward leaping sixth, followed by imitative entries of the upward leaping seventh, followed by an upward leaping octave. Notice also this motif that was prominent in the first movement. I'll let you explore that more on your own time. And these imitative figures played by the violins. Now comes one of the most gorgeous, luxuriously romantic moments of the symphony, when the upward leaping 7th version of the theme is played in invertible counterpoint with this new downward leaping 6th motif. Remember that invertible counterpoint does not refer to the flipping upside down of the theme itself, which is confusingly also called inversion and is something we'll see an incredible amount of later in the movement, but refers instead to the interchangeable locations of the parts. In this case, the gray motif enters first as the accompaniment and then as the melody. This luxurious interlude leads to a reprise of the theme, this time occurring with even more dense imitative counterpoint, again played over the pizzicato accompaniment, but this time with an additional countermotif played by the first violins. Also notice at the end of this section the invertible counterpoint involving the pizzicato accompaniment that now becomes the melody. If this entire section involving the orange theme represents the second theme of this enormous sonata form, then I consider this next bombastic fortissimo passage to be the closing theme of the exposition section. It consists of a rhythmically augmented variant of the green theme, combined with the inverted or upside down orange theme. When it repeats, the green theme variant now occurs with a rhythmically jarring close imitation from the horns. The passage eventually dwindles to a pianissimo, rhythmically augmented entry of the orange theme, followed by an even quieter and even more rhythmically augmented entry of the inverted orange theme, setting the stage for the momentous entry of the completely new blue chorale theme I mentioned earlier. The blue chorale theme is now introduced for the first time, played forcefully by a large brass choir, with responding echoes from the strings. I'm highlighting the actual melody with the lighter blue color, and the remainder of the chorale harmonization with the darker blue. Notice that this theme, like the purple theme from the first movement, modulates to a new key, in this case 1/2 step downward from C flat major to B flat major. The double bar line signals the beginning of the development section, when the real contrapuntal fun begins. First with a fugue using the new blue theme as its subject, and then with a double fugue combining the blue theme with the earlier green theme. We just heard the combination of the theme with its almost inversion, and now, after an unaccompanied statement of the theme by the solo horn, the woodwinds again combine the upright theme with its inversion. This acts like a teaser for what's to come, and it's reminiscent of the moment I explained in my video about the finale of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, that also combines the theme with its inversion as a teaser before also plunging into an incredibly complex fugal passage. The fugue now begins with the subject immediately combined with imitative figures, one of which includes this important new yellow syncopated motif. It continues with combinations of the yellow motif and the orange motif from earlier, acting as counter-subjects. After the fugal exposition, the first stretto of the blue theme appears. Remember that a stretto is when entries of the fugal subject are squeezed together temporally so they overlap. In this case, they barely overlap, likely because it's difficult to superimpose two statements of a modulating subject. However, shortly thereafter, a closer stretto does occur, but Bruckner cheats a little by altering the final two notes of the first entry so it no longer modulates. To hear examples of modulating close imitative counterpoint that remains strict throughout, check out the 3-voice modulating canon at the minor third I composed earlier this year, or the 4th canon from my earlier piece, 13 canons at each interval, or the much more slowly modulating canon that inspired both of these from Bach's Musical Offering. The fugue continues by now inverting the subject and combining it with truncated fragments of itself. Now listen to the fugue up to this point. Now comes one of my favorite moments of the piece, the ingenious crescendo that transitions to the double fugue. It features the yellow syncopated motif played over a bass line that closely resembles the green subject, signaling that the green subject is about to enter the fray. The double fugue now enters emphatically, with the green subject played by the lower strings, accentuated by the timpani, and the blue subject played by the horns. If this isn't already complicated enough for you, the violins also simultaneously play the syncopated yellow motif, and the violas play octave leaps resembling the green subject. In addition to its contrapuntal complexity, what makes this moment so unique is its tonal ambiguity. Remember that the blue subject innately modulates a half step downward. The green subject does not modulate, but it does transiently shift upward a half step. This allows the two subjects to be combined simultaneously, but it creates a startlingly immediate shift from the B-flat major beginning of the section to C-flat major one measure later. Rather than explaining every aspect of the spectacular complexity that now ensues, I'll point out a few choice examples and let you watch and listen as the bewilderingly labyrinthine counterpoint unfolds. First, notice this three-part stretto of the green subject and its inversion, combined with a three-part stretto of the blue subject. Also notice this five-part stretto of the green subject and its inversion, combined with various other motifs derived from the green subject. These four-part strettos of just the inversion combined with this briar patch of related motifs. This three-part stretto of the inversion combined with the blue subject. This four-part stretto of the inversion combined with the inverted blue subject. And various other combinations that will make your head spin. Finally, Bruckner gives us a half a measure of rest from the relentless counterpoint, and just as we think it might have ended, he gives us one final 4-part stretto of the green subject, combined with the blue subject and green-related motifs. This leads to the end of the development section, a crescendo during which the timpanist incessantly plays the rhythm of the green subject, with strettos of the beginning of the blue subject and its inversion. This exciting crescendo leads to the recapitulation section that returns to the original B-flat major, with a forceful tutti simultaneous statement of the green and blue subjects that eventually devolves into increasingly fragmented and incomplete statements of the two subjects. The orange section now returns and is very similar to its original appearance in the exposition section, but listen for these additional motifs from the first movement. If you're one of the few brave souls still watching this video, and you're feeling symptoms of counterpoint fatigue from that development section, then brace yourselves for the rest of this recapitulation section. The bombastic augmented variant closing theme has just entered, but now immediately pivots to a return of the purple theme that we haven't heard since its brief appearance in the slow introduction of this movement. If you've listened to the first movement, then you know that this theme has already been subjected to very thorough contrapuntal manipulation, but not quite to the extent you're about to witness. Again, I'll just point out a few choice moments and you can watch the rest as it unfolds. Notice these densely overlapping combinations of the purple theme, green variant, and orange theme. This spectacular 5-part close stretto of the purple theme and its inversion, and these bewildering combinations of the green and purple themes and their inversions, including finally the full-length versions of both subjects that are still compatible with each other. The recapitulation section now begins its transition to the triumphant coda of all codas, which, although less contrapuntally complex than the preceding sections, is still likely my favorite part of the movement. The transition consists of a large crescendo with a long dominant pedal point played initially just by the timpanist, while the rest of the orchestra plays entries of the green subject that modulate gradually upward, with the pedal point staying constant throughout, until the tonality comes full circle back to B-flat major for the beginning of the coda. Bruckner later used this same technique in his 7th Symphony to great effect, and I explained this moment and the technique in more detail in a prior video. The coda begins with most of the orchestra playing the green theme triple forte in augmentation, with the clarinets playing the inverted augmentation. This stunning moment reminds me of a similar passage at the end of Bach's C major organ fugue, BWV 547, when the subject gloriously enters for the first time in augmentation, played on the pedals, which have been silent for the entire preceding fugue. Remember, of course, that Bruckner was also one of Europe's most renowned organists, and organ-like gestures are common in his symphonic writing. Even though the coda begins at near maximum intensity, it somehow continues to escalate by again modulating continuously upward, culminating in the exalted final climax of the movement, a return of the blue chorale theme that we haven't heard since the development section, now also entering in rhythmic augmentation, and amazingly, combined with a 4-part stretto of variously strict versions of the non-augmented green theme. I've always wondered whether this triumphant return of a previously introduced chorale theme was inspired by the very similar event in the finale of Brahms's First Symphony, or vice versa. Coincidentally, both symphonies were finished in 1876, but I'm unsure that either composer knew anything about the symphony the other was composing. The phrases of the chorale theme are punctuated by intervening horn passages, the first of which my older brother and I used to call the John Williams passage, because we thought it was uncharacteristically banal and out of place in this otherwise sublime moment, and also possibly because of its resemblance to the leitmotif representing the Force from the Star Wars soundtrack. Now that we've heard 2 of the 3 main themes in augmentation, it's only fitting that the second horn interlude is the augmented purple theme. These interludes are great examples of how 4 horns playing triple forte can still be completely overpowered by a choir of trumpets, trombones, and tuba, at least in most recordings. It's also interesting to me, given the Herculean feats of counterpoint we've witnessed, that Bruckner never simultaneously combines all 3 themes contrapuntally, which seems like the natural thing to do at the end of such a piece. Instead, over the continuing 4-part stretto of the green theme, the trumpets play triumphant entries of the purple theme, leading to its last statement by the whole orchestra, before the final notes of one of the most majestic and certainly one of the most complex symphonic movements ever composed.